So sometimes when I work with people who have ADHD, right, or on the spectrum or have ADHD, I see this problem where, they explain why they did something, right? So, I forgot this thing, or it slipped my mind, or I know I was supposed to pick this up. Like they make some kind of mistake and then they offer an explanation. And sometimes the explanation is, I've got ADHD. And then the problem is like when they try to explain themselves, people interpret it as defensiveness. They do get emotionally activated. They get defensive, right? That does happen. Like you feel defensive. You're like, look, you're not listening to me. Here's what's going on. And then the problem is that when you get defensive, oftentimes people in a weird way are less likely to listen to you. That the more you try to explain your side, the more you get punished for having a good explanation. This is not work I've done a whole lot, but like sometimes I'll have someone who is on the autism spectrum or is neurodiverse, let's say, and they find themselves in these like weird traps of social interaction. So how do you handle criticism without getting defensive? When you make a mistake, how do you offer mitigating circumstances and have them received? That's what we're going to talk about today. So a couple of things to understand. If you're neurodiverse, your empathic circuits are going to be different, right? This is why I think Richard Barkley cites this research. I could be wrong about it, but I think I've seen a paper very similar about how, if you've got ADHD by the time you're in the second grade, one study found that 0% of kids get invited to birthday parties if they have ADHD in the second grade. I mean, that's not true globally, but like it shows that people with ADHD have a lot of social impairment. Okay. Autism also has social impairment. So when we engage in these social interactions, we're kind of at a disadvantage. And then on top of that, there's another element of this, which is emotional dysregulation and hyperactivation of our limbic system. So one of the key things, there's one hypothesized subtype of ADHD, which is emotional dysregulation subtype. So what this means is when you get attacked, the stress response, the fear, the paranoia, all those kinds of things actually escalate. So you feel very attacked and you have to defend yourself. So you kind of lose control of that emotion as well. And then as they attack you, you get defensive. As you get defensive, it doesn't work, right? Because when someone attacks you and you get defensive, like sometimes it can work, but oftentimes it doesn't work. It's not the best strategy. So what do we do about this, right? Because oftentimes getting defensive just gets people more pissed at you. It sounds like you're making an excuse. So there are 2 or 3 things that we need to do. The first is understand what triggers the highest amount of defensiveness. When someone makes a claim about you that is tied to your identity, the defensiveness will skyrocket. Okay, so when someone calls you stupid, if you have a psychological vulnerability, oh my God, maybe I'm stupid, and it can be buried real deep, you will protest very prodigiously, right? So that when someone makes fun of us or calls us out on something, it is our own psychological vulnerabilities, right? So that's a psychological vulnerability, so I have to get defensive around it. If you look at the difference between people who can't take criticism and people who can take criticism, it has to do with whether the criticism ties to their identity. Can I be a smart person who makes a mistake, or does a mistake make me stupid? So we see this in a really good way in narcissism, right? The great example of this. An event becomes an identity. Since you oversalted this food, I am a terrible cook. So if you are trying to not get defensive with people, the first thing that you should ask yourself is, what does this criticism say about me? And if your mind does the work of tying a criticism to an identity, the defensiveness will activate at a very high level. So that's where there's some amount of work that we can do to tease these things apart. Let me separate this out, right? So I can be a smart person who made a mistake. It doesn't mean I'm a stupid person. So in the ADHD guide, there's a couple of videos about how ADHD leads to depression. Because when we grow up with something like ADHD or autism, it shapes our perception of ourself. And undoing that identity-based conclusion is very important. Now, the second thing that when I'm working with, so that's one thing that I try to do with them, help them understand, okay, like, why are you defensive about this? What about this makes you think about is a vulnerability about yourself? What does this say about you as a person? And the moment that it defines you as a person, that's when you're going to get a lot of defensiveness. And then when we get defensive, now we get to the second part, which is how to actually handle the interaction. Despite making literally 1,000 YouTube videos, it seems like people are still struggling with focus and motivation. And that's why we're launching a Doing Stuff bundle. It starts with Dr. K's Guide to ADHD, which breaks down the science behind picking a task and actually following through with it. We're also including an action-focused planner, a meditation journal, and access to our meditation tracks feature, which is designed to help people develop a meditative practice that works for them that you can easily stick to over time. Because progress comes from actually doing stuff, not just watching content. So check out the bundle below. So when someone criticizes me and I get defensive, hey, this food is too salty. No, it's not. Now, this person has a complaint, which I'm not receiving. So when a human being sends a signal and that signal is not received, what does the human being do? They increase the volume or they stop communicating. And usually it happens in that order. No, it is too salty. It is too salty. It is too salty. Whatever. I'm never coming over again. I'm never talking to you again. I'm going to ghost you. I'm going to block you. I'm done. See, when we are trying to be defensive, we're trying to shut down their attack. We're trying to shut down their attack because their attack hurts us in our soul, right? So how do we shut down the attack? Because defensiveness actually causes them to double down. And when they double down, right, their first invasion was repelled, and so they're going to invade again. And then we double down with our defensiveness. So how do we disarm their attack? We actually accept their criticism. We try to use empathy, right? What does it feel like, or what is it like for this food to be too salty? Help me understand that. We try to understand their situation. Can you tell me a little bit more? Great sentence to use. Great question to ask. What do you mean by that? It's too salty. What do you mean? What the fuck do you mean by that? It's too salty, right? But invite them to speak more. So if you look at human relationships, if we get into, it takes two to argue. So when I say something and you contradict me and then I double down and then you double down and then I triple down and you triple down, tension requires like pulling on both ends. Conflict requires pushing on both ends. Like, does that kind of make sense? So the right way to manage this is to actually validate their experience. Right? Oh, is it too salty? Let me try it. Right? So if you sort of become a little bit loose, if you sort of accept what they have to say, which by the way, you can only do if you don't tie it to your identity. Right? That's why it's so hard to do, because we make this tied to our identity. Oh my God, I did screw this up. So what was the mistake that I made? Oh, I didn't send out the PowerPoint on time. Now, here's the other cool thing that you can do. Once you sort of say, tell me a little bit more about that, explain that to me, like, let me understand what went wrong here. Try to really hear them out. We want to encourage them to talk without pushing back, okay? Then there's another interesting thing that we can do. We can turn a defensive excuse. We can pick up mileage. We can turn it into an advantage by outlining our corrective behavior. This is where your side of the story comes in. It feels pretty unsatisfying to not share our side and just take the criticism of other people, okay? So this is where, this was a situation. I didn't send the PowerPoint out on time. Turns out that I had a really rough weekend. My kid was sick all week. I need to do a better job of being more careful on Monday morning when I've had a rough weekend. So you can mention the excuse, but the right way to calm someone down is to highlight the corrective action that you're planning on taking. Acknowledge the circumstances. Acknowledge your situation. But use that defensiveness, use that excuse, use that circumstance as a way forward, right? What are you going to do to fix it next time? That's what most people want to hear. That's what calms most people down. And from your perspective, you can do this in two ways. You can do this as an actual learning, which will help you not make the mistake again, or you can use it as appeasement. So I would actually try to learn from your mistakes. And this is the really cool thing. Instead of being defensive about your mistakes, if you learn from your mistakes, you stop making them. See, defensiveness invalidates the mistake to begin with. It's an excuse, not my problem, not my fault. And y'all tell me, when there's someone in your life who does not take responsibility for their mistakes, what is the likelihood that they make the mistake again? Now, there's one version of, I've seen this specifically with people with ADHD and autism neurodiversity, where there's one unhealthy version of this, which is when someone sort of defaults. So when you grow up neurodiverse, oftentimes you have a lot of self-esteem problems. And when you have self-esteem problems, it can be very easy or almost like reflexive to accept the criticism that anyone sends your way. Some people actually do this and they swing the pendulum so far that, oh yeah, of course it's my fault. I'm an idiot. My identity is that I make mistakes. So anytime you tell me I'm making a mistake, I take it in. And they learn this adaptation because they learn that if they argue, they lose. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take your criticism whole scale. Now, this creates another problem because once you basically never push back on someone's criticism, They're more likely to criticize you again. They will start assigning blame for their mistakes onto you. I've seen this as well. And this is why a lot of times when I work with people, they feel like they can't win. If they defend themselves, people get mad at them. If they accept all of the responsibility, they always get blamed for everything. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation, right? So I think the right way to handle this is actually within yourself. So it is shoring up that internal vulnerability, disconnecting the action from the identity, developing that sense of confidence and self-esteem. Because if you just accept the blame that everyone sends your way, you're never going to develop confidence. Second thing is to incorporate constructive criticism. Alter what you're going to do. Try to stop making a mistake. And when these two things come together, that is when you will know when to accept criticism and when to push back. When I have very low self-esteem, I push back 100% out of a defensive posture and out of an accepting posture. Does that kind of make sense? So once I develop confidence, once I can look at what my mistakes are and own my mistakes, I can say, oh yeah, I did do this. I didn't submit the PowerPoint on time, but you were supposed to get me the PowerPoint on Thursday morning. I didn't get it until Saturday morning. So this was a situation where the PowerPoint was delayed, and it so happened that this weekend things were kind of crazy. If things were not crazy, I may have been able to get it in on time. But you also didn't get the PowerPoint in on Thursday when you were supposed to, right? And then they will get defensive. And then you can be validating for that, right? So, and then a really good thing, a very useful thing to do is to sort of ask people like, okay, like where are we now, right? And like, here's what I'm planning on changing. What are you planning on changing? Just ask that question. It's a way to signal to someone, I'm not taking all the responsibility for this. Now, this too, I know this is going to get kind of weird. This we also have to be careful about. And this is why, like, I don't know if this makes sense, but you can provide people with dialogue on the internet of what they should say. There's always a case in which it doesn't work. And here's the example of that. If you are very narcissistic and you make a mistake, you are always going to ask the other person what they can do differently. Have you guys ever been on the receiving end of this? Where someone screws up and they're like, yeah, I did this, but what are you going to do? It is your fault too. Even when the blame is predominantly on their end, they shift some of the blame to you because they can't take all of the blame. And so this is why social interactions are hard. There's absolutely a way to work through them, right? So we want to validate what their concern is. We really do want to hear them out. And that is our advantage because then we won't make that mistake again. It improves our performance. It improves our relations. That becomes hard because of our sense of identity. Our identity is caught up in a mistake. And if we're not careful, we'll swing the pendulum too far on the other side. We'll accept responsibility for everything. So we don't want to do that. So how do you find that balance? You develop that confidence. You own your mistakes. And there may be another element of pointing out theirs too. But that only works if you do it as the third step, right? I got to hear them out first, own mine, and then I can point out yours. A lot of defensiveness is you criticize me, but you didn't send it to me on Thursday. So it's so simple. There's a sequence. Criticize somebody else after you've owned up to what you did wrong. It'd be way better received.